I'm gonna hit record, and then Sarah, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
All right. Oh, I'm getting feedback. Should I be able to also hear? There we go. That worked. So, welcome everyone. As Emily said, I'm Sarah Rice, a librarian here at Forefront. This is going to be Introduction to Fundraising Planning. You can see Grant Space as a name on that initial slide. That is a free website called grantspace.org. So if anyone has kind of other questions about the grant writing process, it is a great space to check out. You do have to create a login credentials for it, but all you have to do is type in an email and create a password. It is a free site to access. Some of the webinars on it do have a fee, but other resources are completely free of charge. It is managed by an organization called Candid. They used to be Foundation Center, and we work with them. Forefront, the Forefront Library, is a funding information network partner, or FIN for short. That is how we have access to databases like Foundation Directory Online and some of the other products that are created by Candid. They also create some of the material that we present in workshops as well. So let's get into Introduction to Fundraising Planning. So what we are covering today are the basic steps for developing a fundraising plan. This is an introductory class, so we're not going to be able to cover every aspect of your fundraising strategy today. Our hope is that this class will kickstart you in the right direction and lead to more in-depth conversations with your staff or the board of your organization about what exactly your fundraising needs and strategies are and can be. Class should be about an hour. One of those handouts that hopefully people got Friday afternoon is an exercise, which you can do on your own time. Since this is a webinar, we don't really have the kind of hands-on means of handling it here, but it is one to kind of explore this more in depth about accessing strategies for your organization. All right, so what exactly is a fundraising plan? It is a living document that lays out specific fundraising tasks and strategies, including who's responsible for completing them, the time frame of when they need to be accomplished. Ultimately, a successful fundraising plan can help your organization be proactive rather than reactive to any of your fundraising needs. Many times, all of us as nonprofits have fundraising crises. We've all been there before, and most of us are there right now. Where we are struggling to meet programmatic and fundraising goals. So a fundraising plan is kind of the roadmap that helps you get from where you are to where you want to be, and can be also flexible as well to take into kind of account some unexpected occurrences. Right, so let's think a little bit about why a fundraising plan is important. Planning is a critical activity for your organization's success. Planning focuses everyone by setting fundraising priorities. It helps give your staff, your board, your volunteers an understanding of the big picture, the organization's funding needs, how you plan to meet them. It's something that kind of everyone can buy into, even if they're somebody who is not in a fundraising role specifically. It's the whole staff's responsibility to understand the plan and their role in the process. Fundraising is a team sport. Board involvement, critical to your fundraising success. Having an agreed upon plan strengthens board commitment, strengthens their involvement when you're fundraising goals, and making sure that they are very well aware of how this all ties into the mission and the goals of the entire organization. And of course, having a diversified fundraising plan, which can prevent your organization from becoming over-dependent on one source. In the library, we have several times had people come in who are running smaller nonprofits where they are looking for grant funding for the very first time. And it's not because they're a new organization, although that is certainly an occurrence, but these organizations that have been around for 10, 15, I think one of them was nearly 30 years, but they had been up until this point completely dependent on one donor. And that person, in one case, had unfortunately recently passed away, or they were trying to kind of expand services and needed to go beyond what that one donor could do. Being able to have a plan where you are already diversifying things definitely helps prevent the scrambling of that kind of scenario. Now, most fundraising plans fall into a fiscal year or a calendar year. They can take months to put together. It's not something one person's going to sit down and just write in an hour. The executive director and the board have the responsibility to approve the plan. The staff and the board have a responsibility to implement it. Therefore, it might be appropriate to have a team consisting of leadership members, program members, financial staff involved in the entire planning process. A little like you do as well for a lot of strategic planning. This is basically a very kind of focused idea of strategic planning. This can depend on the size and structure of an organization. If you're, a two-person shop, it's really probably just going to be both of you anyway. It's critical that the board and senior staff have some ownership of the plan, so buy-in from them from the beginning is very important. Now, more likely than not, your plan's going to go through some edits. There's going to be drafts. It may be helpful to share the drafts with other staff members of board if you have people who are not involved initially in the smaller committee, and get feedback on, how it's going. Because it can be very easy if you're part of one group that is focused on a thing to not explain it very well, or to kind of make assumptions that somebody who's on the outside might not make. I will be changing slides. I just have a lot of notes on this first one. Thank you for asking. This one's just got a lot of words with it. Sorry, it's not a very interesting visual for everyone right now. So keep in mind that your plan should be formulated and approved several months prior to the beginning of your fiscal or calendar year. Bottom line, no staff or, oh, sorry, I will try to slow down. I'm speaking too quickly. That is not a problem. Thank you for mentioning that. So bottom line, no staff or board member should be given the finalized approved plan and told to implement it having not seen it at all before. It should not be a surprise to them. So how do you start a fundraising plan? We have 6 basic steps for developing a plan. Identifying assets, developing a case statement, setting up your goals, creating an action plan, implementing the plan, and evaluating the plan. We will talk about each one of these in more detail on following slides, so don't worry about getting them all done right here. They will come back to us one at a time. But before we get into each individual step, we are going to look at 2 very important sorts of pie charts. First is one that breaks down all types of nonprofit revenue. So a lot of nonprofits are going to have pieces that reflect a lot of these different pieces as well. Now, you may not. You may have an organization that has no dealings with government sources, so you may not receive any money for services or goods from government grants that are government sources. That might not be a part of your makeup. But for the sector as a whole, these are kind of the percentages of where the money comes from. When we think about the nonprofit sector as a whole, and you look at how nonprofits in general are supported, it's interesting to note that fees for services and goods from private sources are the largest category of revenue. This is, well, for example, here at Forefront, while this workshop was free of charge, a lot of our workshops do have a fee for them. And so paying that fee to attend one of those workshops or one of our meetings, one of our seminars in that way would be fees from a private source for a service or good. Institutional grant makers like foundations would fall under the private contributions category in general if they're giving you grants, that purple slice of the pie. That includes foundations, corporations, individual donors, all of people who are donating money charitably without it being directly in exchange for some kind of service. Government grants have their own piece. Other income there can be a few different things. Primarily, it reflects kind of special events or membership fees. Again, Forefront being a member organization, our membership fees would fall under that slice of the pie if you were looking at our own distribution. Right, so this is kind of how the nonprofit sector as a whole gets supported. Next, we are going to take that purple slice, the private contributions section, and break it down on seeing who is all part of that. So that purple slice of the pie, private contributions, breaks down this way. This is from Giving USA 2019, using data for all of calendar year 2018. So during 2018, there was nearly 428, billion dollars given to the nonprofit sector from private contributions. And the majority of it, as you can see, the vast majority of it is from individual donors. If you've taken the Introduction to Finding Grants course, our prospect research finding grants, you will have seen this chart before. So apologies if it's a duplicate to anyone out there. Now, so you can see that despite what a lot of people might assume, grants from foundations and corporations really only a very modest proportion of charitable giving, because they together here are 23% of the private contributions piece. And from our previous slide, private contributions was still less than 14% of all nonprofit support. So that is something definitely to keep in mind. Vast majority of private giving will come from individuals, people like you and me, who are supporting their local church or their local nonprofit or an organization they have some kind of connection to or have heard about in some way and want to support. So why is this pie chart important to fundraising planning? Well, we hope that it will help everyone realize that the bulk of support isn't going to be from foundations. In order to be a very stable organization and reduce dependency on any one source, diversifying funding streams is necessary, and we'll talk about that in more detail as well. Now, to get back to those 6 steps, we'll be introducing those one at a time. So we're going to start with identifying your assets. You're going to want to ask, what are the current organizational strengths? What makes my organization appealing to a potential funder? When you think about organizational strength, what can come to mind? What makes a strong organization? So there can be any number of things there. What is it about your organization that a potential funder would find compelling? Examples of these can be that you have a very compelling mission. If you have a goal in mind, a kind of changing a piece of the world that is communicated very effectively. That you already have a large public base of support if you are already known in some fashion. That also ties into just name recognition. If you have a name that people can automatically recognize. Now that can also be being known, but that can also be being clear in your name what it is you do. Several organizations will rebrand because they have found that having an organization that was named perhaps after the original founder or something wasn't the most descriptive and didn't really tell people what they did. Seen one organization that changed to kind of family services being part of their name because they really wanted to have that communicated, where before they had kind of a more abstract word as their name. So sometimes that might also just be being clear what it is you're doing in your name as well as your mission. Staff and board connections, if you have people around who are good at networking, who are people who are good at that piece of getting out there and meeting folks and building those connections and relationships, that is hugely important and can be a great benefit to your organization. Facilities, it just says kind of generically there, a great facility. I feel you can take that in a couple of ways, where sometimes it might just be one that is really well suited for what you're doing. If you have, space for little studios, if you're doing arts, if you have kind of smaller rooms for people to practice, if you're doing something like music. So having something that is well suited to what you are doing. And of course, social media, other kinds of things. It specifically says a high traffic website, but we can broaden that out to all kinds of social media. I had not talked about the slides. If people are interested in receiving a copy of the slides, I can certainly ask Emily to email it to everyone. So we will certainly do that. it had not been mentioned before there, thank you for asking. All right. So, yes, Emily's confirming that we can definitely send the slides. We will get those out to everybody. Right, so one of the ways to kind of ascertain the strengths and weaknesses of your organization is conducting a SWOT analysis. Now, a lot of people out there are probably familiar with what this stands for. You may have done one before for your organization. Conducting a SWOT analysis can not only help you identify strengths or what your organization does really well, they can also help you identify where you might need additional funding or where your weaknesses are, where kind of threats to your organization are, which can turn into funding opportunities. Knowing your strengths can also help with the second step in all of this, developing a case statement. If anyone wants me to talk more about what the parts of a SWOT analysis are, let me know in the chat, but we can, I didn't have a lot of notes on that to start with, but if anybody wants a little more detail about what all of that stands for, I will certainly go back to that. Okay, so I do have at least someone who says yes. So a SWOT analysis, as it mentioned to start with, strengths. That is what the S stands for in this. So each of those letters stands for part of what you were looking for in the analysis. A lot of times if you look up templates for doing one, it will have basically kind of 4 quadrants for you to kind of list strengths, weaknesses being the W, opportunities being O, and threats being the T. It's kind of one way to cohesively look at things for your entire organization. So strengths are things you already do well or things that are to your benefit. As I mentioned over here, some of your staff can be a benefit, your a well-communicated mission. These can be kind of abstract things or they can be very practical things. Weaknesses are things that you might not do very well or things that you feel need a lot of improvement. Opportunities are areas for growth. They might be somewhere where you could expand or where you could take advantage of a changing situation, somewhere where you could adapt and just kind of move into maybe a new space or maybe just reinforce things. It's basically somewhere where there's a clear opportunity to improve. And threats are generally things that kind of threaten your organization from the outside. When the last time I helped conduct one of these, I was working at an academic library. And so in our threat section, we had looked at it as kind of a library, and Amazon came up as a threat because we can't really do anything about the existence of, people buying or renting cheap textbooks off of Amazon rather than coming into their library and checking out a book. But it is something to be aware of and something that you can still kind of address. Or to try to make the case for even why this might be a threat, while you can still, reinforce why you are different or present some other kind of opportunity or benefit that may not be represented in this threat. So threats are generally kind of outside things that you cannot nullify yourself because they are not internal. That is usually the weaknesses portion of the analysis. But they are still things that you should be aware of and that can be addressed even if they cannot be eliminated by you internally, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what the SWOT analysis is looking at all of these pieces to get kind of this big picture of your organization and where everything is sitting. So knowing all of that, and especially knowing your strengths and your opportunities, can help you, as I mentioned a little bit ago, with the second step, which is developing a case statement. So this is where you talk about why your organization needs and merits support. Your case statement is going to be a written document. It outlines the general argument for why you deserve support from other people. Common case statements for small or medium-sized nonprofits can be 5 to 10 pages long. It's going to lay out the important facts about your organization, and it should, I should have another piece of the slide. No, Well, I seem to have a small problem there. There's supposed to be another bit of that slide. I will just kind of read that one out since it is not appearing correctly. So case statement lays out the most important facts about an organization and should include the following, which should be on this slide, but is apparently not right now. Your mission and your values. So what it is your organization is trying to do, what it is you kind of value, what you prioritize. That should definitely be there. Your programs and services, what you do in a very practical, on the ground sort of sense. You know, what workshops you offer, what it is, who it is, you know, what exactly you are doing with your particular target audience. Your accomplishments. Have there been any great successes? Have you helped provide after school meals to several hundred children in your county? Have you done, you know, something very specific? Brag about yourself. It's always good to say, you know, we have managed to do this thing. We have established, we have done this, we have, you know, these things in our back pocket, and we can do more with your help. Your plans for the future. That kind of moves in cleanly to that. You talk about what you have done, what has been great, and then you talk about your plans for the future, what it is you want to do, what you can do, what, you know, the support of the people you are making this case to could help you accomplish. And then very practically, your budget needs. What exactly it is you need to do those plans, what it is you need to accomplish them. Preparing the organization's case statement is also an opportunity to collect data that demonstrates your competencies and the effectiveness of your work. If you haven't been collecting that sort of data going along, it is definitely a time to look back and look at exactly kind of those sorts of numbers, who you've been helping, what kind of rates of success are, what has been, can be kind of measured there. Ultimately, the case statement is a core communication tool from staff, volunteers, board members, lets everyone be on the same page, and then it can also be used in writing proposals or press releases or any kind of, you know, social media thing about your organization. Specifically, of course, with writing grant proposals or any kind of appeal document, you will already have a lot of the kind of information that is often asked for in those proposals, or that can be very helpful there. You know, the facts about your organization, or what it is you need monetarily. So, moving on to setting your goals. So before you can articulate exactly where you want to go, you need to know where you are, and you want to start by thinking about current fundraising strategies and answer some of the following questions. Let's hope, yes, that one worked properly. Great. So, who are your current funding partners? Look at your current situation. Make sure that everyone who's helping create this plan, and even if it's just you, has a very clear understanding of where your support comes from now. And this means that your organization should have some kind of system for tracking your current support. There are a lot of different options when it comes to fundraising software and tools. You can find some reviews of things like that on grantspace.org. Grants management, donor tracking software can also be very expensive, so you definitely want to do research there and determine what's best. There are, of course, also free options. I know a lot of very small organizations just use Excel spreadsheets. And if you are proficient in Excel, that can work absolute wonders on just trying to track everything. So if anybody is currently using a grants management or donor tracking software that they think is great, and they would definitely recommend, feel free to toss that into the chat so that other people can check it out and see if it would work for them. Or if you just are using something, you know, free and want to talk about, you know, its benefits, feel free to have that conversation. I would love for people to be able to chat, basically. I'm not sure, Tulani, what exactly you're asking here. Are you talking about how you track the support, or? Right, so this is all part of kind of a larger plan. So a case statement is kind of the looking out at the facts of your organization. Your current partners and your current funding. Yeah, you're trying to just put all of these pieces together. This is, these aren't kind of separate documents. This is all kind of running together. Sorry if it is also blurring together badly here. So yeah, so you have your case statement, talks about all of the facts and background of your organization, what you want to do. Then kind of moving into the budget needs, knowing that requires that you already know where you are. So you might have kind of separate spreadsheets on, what it is we're doing so that you can pull those numbers into the case statement or anything like that. So if you're brand new, oh good, thanks Talani, glad that seemed to have answered your question. So for brand new organizations, it can be a little more difficult. You might want to see if you can find information about similar organizations to kind of see what it is they are doing. You can also kind of look on sites like grantspace.org or the National Council of Nonprofits to get some kind of more general tips about where you should start. If you are literally just starting out, like just in the process of forming your nonprofit, I will definitely recommend going to grantspace.org and looking at their nonprofit startup assessment tool, because that will go over all of these sections, including budgetary sorts of ones, to kind of look at what you know about areas and give you kind of tips on stuff you might need to know in areas that are not as strong as others. It is a big thing. It's, I think, 75 or so questions, but you can save it, leave, come back to it, so you don't have to do it all in one sitting. But if you kind of want to look at all of those pieces and kind of get the very, very start, I definitely recommend that. But if you are fairly new, trying to figure out what your initial goals are, what it is you want to accomplish, and what that will cost will, of course, kind of be the place to start. Like I said, partnering with other organizations kind of to start with, if you want to look at people who are doing similar things or kind of, related subjects, and see if you can work together and see if information can kind of be shared in that fashion, I think would also work for newer organizations as well. All right, you're welcome. So if you are, we also had a note here that I just hadn't read yet. If you're a new organization, current funders might just be your board members, might just be kind of some of the staff or, friends and family who are helping support you. And that is perfectly fine if you're starting with a very small pool there as well. There's always room to grow. Right, so who are your current funders? And making note of who kind of the largest funders are. What sources are generating the most revenue? For some organizations, that might be government support. If you have partnerships with the city or the state, that might be the biggest piece for you. It might be individual giving. That's pretty frequently going to be the case for a lot of people. It might be your fees and services. But just make sure to keep that in mind, and also kind of keep in mind if that's where you want it to be. If that's not how you really want the organization to be supported, it might be another kind of goal to think about to see how you might be able to shift that. If you wanted to be more involved with, providing goods and services to local government, or if you wanted to do more of your own workshops and seminars and less and be less reliant on some grants. The other question, where can you strengthen your funding base? What funders may be able to increase their level of support? This is one where you can start kind of looking at the people where you might be building those relationships further, or looking into them more in detail to see if you can kind of steward that and see if you can get them to be more involved. That might not always be in a monetary fashion. You might be able to include some of these people if they want to volunteer time to work and support the organization in some fashion. If they have skills that might be of use, if somebody who's going to be able to teach classes in something they're an expert in, if they're able to do some admin work, or if they are just going to be, supporting in some fashion. Some of your supporters, if they aren't already, may be interested in being board members if you're looking at expanding, or if it's, turnover time there. Yes, we will be sending out the slides. We will definitely do that. That's the second person to ask about that. So I guess probably should have sent those out with the other handouts on Friday. Sorry about that. Other ways to possibly strengthen the funding base. Your current funders have the greatest potential for growth because they already know you and they already support you. So it's important to think about how you can not only maintain their support, to keep connections, but to grow those relationships to try to increase funding on that front. Then we have the prettiest slide. So this is the very abstract interpretation of looking at kind of diversifying things. Now that we've talked about knowing where you are, determining where you need to go, and how to get there. So I'm sure pretty much everyone, even before today, has heard the phrase diversifying your funding base. Just like the saying that you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, you can think about the river on this picture as your organization. All of the little streams feeding into it. Implementing different fundraising strategies lessens the possibility of that river drying out if flow from one income source, if one of these streams changes direction or dries up itself or is dammed. So, for example, if your organization only receives government support and that the government ends the program you were getting that from, it does not go well for your organization at that point. So just like that pie chart from earlier, foundations are one current potential revenue stream, sample of what other streams can include. Looking at, who are the funders that can provide you with most long-term security. That is also frequently kind of individuals as well, because individuals are frequently very loyal once they have started giving. But you may be adding in foundation grants or government funding or more individual donors, depending on what your balance currently looks like and what possibilities kind of are for your organization to do. All organizations are different, so your revenue streams, your balance is going to be different as well. Other possible revenue streams you can look at corporate contributions or sponsorships, looking especially at smaller businesses if you're in an area for that. Crowdfunding, of course, has become far more popular in recent years and is often a great way to get donations from people who may not think of themselves as largely charitable, but can toss in a little money here and there, and that can add up a lot if you can run a successful social media sort of campaign. So the key takeaway kind of here is that a strong river means a strong organization. So the more of those little streams, the more of the diverse kind of funding sources you have, the larger and more stable you can be. So as you're thinking about how to diversify your organization's funding streams, you want to determine, questions on the slide, funders that can provide you with the most long-term security. Consider how likely anyone is to renew or increase their support over time. If you're getting a grant from a foundation or from the government, is it one where you have to take time off? There are a number of foundations who will say that they won't fund an organization this year if they funded you last year. Or there might be, a firm timeline on the government program where it's a 3-year thing and it's not going to basically exist after that. So those obviously wouldn't be kind of long-term security. So looking at who does do things for multi-years or who at least has that possibility, who it is you can kind of rely on. What funders and streams might you be able to add to your current mix? So who should be funding your organization and isn't? Consider all of the possible sources we've been talking about. Determine what's feasible for your organization based on what your mission is, where you are, the population you're serving. Think about your programs and your services, how they affect your community, and who would be interested. Who could you tie in that would also have a benefit from supporting you? This can also be a tack to take if you are looking at businesses or corporate giving, because corporate social responsibility is often a very large piece of many corporations' business plans currently. So thinking about who might be interested in giving back in that way locally can be a very good thing to do. For example, if an organization was running an after-school program for teens, people in the community who might be affected and then thus be interested in supporting it, you know, school, teachers, parents, other small business owners, because especially if your after-school program was doing any kind of life or job skills, um, business owners around might be interested in supporting that as well. The local municipality, there's often, concern about kids, especially teens, not being involved in things and, falling through the cracks or not being supported. So a lot of people in the community could have some kind of buy-in for an organization that was trying to keep kids, supported and having them be in a safe place where they can uh, learn any number of things. So, and finally, how much time and money is it going to take to secure additional funding partners? This is an area where you have to be realistic because it will always take time. Even if it's just making a phone call and talking to someone, if you have to write a proposal, there are any number of things that can go into trying to secure a new funding stream or a grant or anything like that. And looking at what is going to cost you to even try to obtain that new source can help you determine where you need to focus your efforts. If there is a very lucrative sort of grant, but the management of it, the time it would take, the number of people it would require to get all of the reporting done, you might look at that balance and say that, that doesn't work out for you. We actually know a library that received a very large grant for census work, and it ended up being extremely problematic for them because they had a very small staff. They were a small kind of rural library, and they didn't have enough people to both kind of manage the reporting and the communication the grant required, and also actually go out in the community and do the outreach for the actual census work that the grant was supposed to be for. So it actually wasn't working out at all for them for that money to actually enable them to accomplish more of their mission. So definitely look at kind of the cost of the source that you're looking for. Is that grant worth it if it's going to have so much kind of tape around it? I do not believe there's an exact formula or ideal ratio for fundraising expense or effort to revenue. So that's probably going to depend on a lot of factors. If you are a kind of one-person shop, then you definitely need stuff that's very low effort so that you can also do your work. If you have a lot of staff, then you might be able to dedicate one person entirely to managing a report. If you're a large organization as well, you might be able to outsource some of the reporting things. You might also be able to do that as a small organization. Back office collaborative and other resources exist for people that want to kind of have a where they can't, if you aren't able to kind of manage all of your back office things in-house, they can help out with services there. So it kind of depends on what your exact needs are going to be. So sorry, I don't believe there's actually a formula for expense to revenue. It's probably going to just kind of depend on what is worth it to you or to your organization. Right, so a fundraising action plan sounds kind of daunting, but it just sounds more daunting than it actually is. This is where you actually set your goals for each of your revenue strategies, or kind of the little streams, if you think back to our previous very serene picture. Think through all of the details for each one, who they are, when you would be receiving funds from them, what those funds are, how you are going to go about receiving those funds. Create charts, timetables, or a narrative description outlining the details. You might not have all of those pieces. That's not how everyone involved in the organization kind of thinks, but definitely have some way of communicating all of the details, showing when things are going to happen, who's in charge of them, how it's going to be accomplished, so that you can refer back to this. You can update it if things change, and if anybody needs to know how things are going, you'll have a place that you are able to kind of check things off or look at where everything is going. So we have an example here. So if you have a goal to raise $60,000 in foundation grants by the end of the calendar year, so your pieces of kind of your timeline or your table might include the development staff is going to research potential prospects and determine strategies for each of them, and that they're going to do that in the very beginning of the year, January, February. That's the first task for the development staff. They might do this with something like Foundation Directory Online, since we're talking here about foundation grants. It's going to go early on. Based on that research, we'll determine how many possible prospects need to be approached. If you're looking at organizations who are interested in your work, you will also be able, you also want to take into account what size grants they generally give. Because if you're looking at the $60,000 number and you find a bunch of organizations that all tend to give $5,000 grants, you would need to successfully get grants from 12 of them for this number. And I believe it's the number that usually gets tossed around is roughly 1 out of 3 proposals gets accepted when you're sending in proposals. So you would probably actually need to apply to create things for 3 times the number you are hoping on getting accepted. And that can tie back into that, is this worth it for your organization to try to do it this way? Or do you need to kind of do some more research to see if you find organizations that tend to give larger grants? So based on all of that, determine how many possible prospects that need to be approached, the appropriate ask amount. You can determine if the grant maker has supported similar organizations to yours or similar programs, and then how much to ask them for. Now, however, as mentioned, you're going to have to approach at least 3 times that, which doesn't really sound like the odds are in your favor. Now, we're talking about an example here, but as you come up with these goals, you need to make sure your organization has the time, the capacity to do it. For a lot of organizations, it might not be possible to submit this many proposals in 1 quarter, in 4 months. And of course, you're also working with funder deadlines and timelines. A lot of foundations only accept things at certain times of year, so that you also have to take that into account as well. Our next step on this is the board and staff will review the list of prospects in the hopes of finding kind of a connection, to see if anybody, has ties to any of the organizations that you're looking at asking for funding from. Because a lot of times having that kind of relationship, being able to mention it will get a foot in the door. If you are looking at organizations that don't tend to accept unsolicited proposals, it can often help if you know who to talk to see how you become not unsolicited. That timeline for our example here is going to be March. Want that to be done also pretty quickly so that we can move along with this. And so once we have kind of potential prospects, once the board and staff can review them to kind of narrow it down to see if you might be able to work through a potential person, development staff then submits the proposals to potential prospects, and again, trying to do it the first half of the year. Oh, I'm glad it's helpful. Good. I'm glad it feels not overwhelming. So you can spread things out a little bit. Everything doesn't have to be done immediately. This, of course, is just an example. Your organization might be working on kind of a different time structure, especially if you're dealing with a July to June fiscal year or something else like that. Right, so once you've kind of done all this background thinking, done all of this research, created kind of some of your plans, you want to implement it. Implement the action plan. Check in regularly with your board and your staff to see if you're on track. Because fundraising plan, is not something to create and then just never look at again. It's supposed to be a living document. If things change, there are huge upheavals, like the current moment in time, you can and should revise it, adjust it along the way as you begin to see what's working and what's not. And as you move along, you can evaluate it, see what worked, what's successful. Was what you raised this time worth your expenditure of time and effort? That can all help lay the groundwork for next year's plan. Going back to the previous question, while I'm not aware of a formula in general for organizations, being able to start benchmarking your own organization can be very helpful here on what it costs you in time, in effort, in staff hours to accomplish the fundraising that you did, and what it is you might need to change to adjust that input and that output if it did not go well this time. Because sometimes it was all worth it, it was great. And sometimes you need to try something else or eliminate something that didn't work so well and try a new thing next year. So going back to our example, that $60,000 in foundation grants in 1 calendar year. So going back to it, you will review the pending confirmed requests to make sure you're on track. Because if you want to get all of these, grants applications in by June, you can, depending on, feedback you get from foundations as you submit things, you might be able to add more in if you get kind of early refusals from things, or if you get approved for less than the amount you asked for. You still have the latter half of this year to kind of make adjustments there, to revise the strategy, get more proposals out, do a little more research, and then make sure to revise the plan as necessary based on results for basically also the latter half of this year and for, of course, the following year. Right, so I'll show again these 6 big steps that we've just gone over and brought through a lot of detail there. There they all are. Does anybody have questions that they haven't put in the chat at this point? If anybody's got anything else they want to toss out there. We'll give it a moment in case anybody's typing. I know I always get a little sad if if a presenter asks that question, then basically immediately moves over to the next slide, because typing takes some time, and not saying anything leaves kind of a silence that feels like forever. If anybody's ever done theater, dead air can feel about, I think it's, we always joked 10 times longer than it really happens. So that if you are perfectly quiet for 10 seconds, it feels like it's been 100. So that can take a while typing can take a very long time, especially if you are like me and not the most proficient typing person. Right, so I do not see, there we go. So, how much organizations using digital channels for fundraising? So, I do not know that number offhand. I know that Giving USA looks at that. I know that it is currently very much increasing. I believe for 2018 over 2017, it increased 10% in general. But I don't know exactly how that translates or how much organizations are using it. That is definitely something that is still being looked into, and it is definitely a channel that is growing. And of course, digital channels for fundraising can cover a number of kind of ideas, because of course there are very passive sorts of things like having a donut button, a donate. Doesn't everyone want a donut button? But having a donate button on your website, updating your GuideStar profile to have a donate button there. If anyone is listening to this and has not checked out, yes, everyone should want a donut button. If anyone here has not checked out the organization's profile on GuideStar, I highly recommend having someone in your organization claim your profile, which is a pretty easy process that you can do by looking up your organization, telling them you are a member of it, and then they will try to verify. They will try to verify that basically by contacting someone who is on, listed as a contact on your organization's 990. And then you can update your profile, and that can include putting a donate button on there. Let's see. I mentioned the back office collaborative. That is their name. So I don't know how hard they might be to Google for everyone, but back office collaborative is an organization. I believe they are linked from Forefront's website if you go to our join button and look at member benefits, because I believe Forefront members are eligible for some sort of discount through them. So you can try to find more information on them through that channel, or as I said, their name is Back Office Collaborative, which, all being very common words, is not going to perhaps be the easiest thing to find, but hopefully they aren't too difficult to search out. Let's see. So, right, going back again, just a bit to digital channels, since I got kind of sidetracked talking about GuideStar for a moment. Yeah, because there are a wide variety of possible digital channels for fundraising. There are kind of, like I said, the passive things like donate buttons. There are, just building kind of your brand through social media as well, making appeals that way to, a digital audience that is following you. There are special events like Giving Tuesday or I'll Give, where there's, a huge push for online donations. There can be more kind of general crowdfunding things if your organization was, trying to do GoFundMe or something where you're trying to do a very specific project and get fundraising support that way. So there are a lot of channels that's kind of becoming a more diverse stream all on its own. And it is definitely something that's on the increase. So I don't know offhand how much it is working right now for all organizations, but it is definitely an important piece and becoming more important, especially right now. There are a lot of articles out there about online donations in our current situation with the COVID-19 crisis. I know there are articles for religious organizations about doing online tithing and collections that way. And there are all kinds of things on trying to, reach your community through online means and have them still be involved. Now for things on how long it takes to set up a case. If we're talking about building the whole plan, I mentioned basically months. This is something like a strategic plan where it can take a while to do. Now, if we were just looking at that one part, the kind of case statement, that depends a little bit on how easy it is to get all of the data that was mentioned in it, facts about your organization. So if you haven't been collecting data on what your accomplishments are, that could take longer. So yeah, the whole thing is definitely something that's going to be a project of months. I have not created a fundraising plan as a major participant myself, but I have created a marketing plan, and that took a number of months all on its own as well. So again, and as living documents, you're going to come back and revisit them to update, to check off things, to make changes if you need to. Should the whole fundraising team take part in the plan? Well, they should have some part in it. You might not have, depending on how many people are part of your team, you might not have all of them in all of the meetings for it. You might just have a smaller committee that's a couple of people from the fundraising team, a couple of people from your senior leadership, a couple of people from programming to, kind of look at things. But definitely there should be, time for feedback or suggestions that you're getting from all staff. So definitely the whole fundraising team should have a part, but they might not all be involved in actually, being the small committee that is writing the plan themselves, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. Are many organizations investing in paid campaigns? Now, I know some are. I do not know statistics, unfortunately, of that on offhand. I know a lot of organizations will at least occasionally do, boosted posts on Facebook or other kinds of things, where you occasionally kind of pay to make sure things get to a broader audience. I believe, I wonder if people would give me a moment, I'm going to see, because I know I have read a report about online giving, and I want to kind of see if I can very quickly find a thing about it. Right. Okay, there's one of them. Um, so there is an organization that is M&R, and they do a benchmark study that looks at online giving. So they have a sample size for it, um, and let's see if I can real quick see if their URL is an easy one to. There we go. All right, I'm going to copy their URL and paste that into the chat if anybody kind of wants to look at that report. So they have data about online giving. It's kind of what they look at for their participants. So you can kind of look at web engagement and things like that, and kind of see what they have found for nonprofits using kind of online means for donations. Do you mean a link to a sample fundraising plan? Vanessa asked about a link or sample of planning fundraising. Oh, so, well, that's their organizations that offer fundraising services. So that's going to depend, what they offer is going to depend a lot on what organization you're looking at. They might do consulting for things. It might be a way to kind of outsource. Huh, really? Oh, I see why you don't see my link, because I sent it just to panelists rather than all attendees. Try that again, sorry. Right, going back to organizations offering fundraising services. So yeah, again, that might be helpful if you want kind of consulting on things, if you want kind of a more personalized look at your organization and things like that. They might do some of the analyses, like I talked about the SWOT analysis. They might do something like that and a deeper sort of dive for your particular organization. So they might do that and kind of advise you on steps you should take. They might have kind of professional experience about doing some of the outreach pieces. They might have grant writing services. So there's going to be several different pieces if they're, an organization helping with fundraising. Kind of depends a little bit on what kind of help you're looking for and what they specialize in. If anybody does kind of want help in that area, I'd kind of advise looking at the Association of Consultants to Nonprofits. ACN is an organization Forefront works with quite frequently, and they have a number of members who can advise on a wide variety of topics if you're wanting to kind of get specialized kind of professional help in some area there. So I do not have a link handy to a sample fundraising plan, but I am sure I can find one on my computer. I have a great many documents saved. As a librarian, I will try to look for one, and I will have Emily include that as a document when we send out the slides. So hopefully that will be helpful for people. All right, so I think that covers all of the questions I've got there. So we'll just bring up, I believe, our final slide here, hopefully. All right, so key takeaways. Know where you are starting and where it is you need to go. What is your organization's strengths? What are your weaknesses, opportunities, threats? Diversify your funding streams. Your strongest supporters this year might not be your strongest supporters next year. Be able to judge their reliability, be able to, get a funding mix that will help build a stronger river for you. Set very realistic goals. Make sure your plan is applicable, appropriate for your organization, achievable. You can look into another business acronym here and try to set SMART goals, which SMART goals are achievable, timely, and since I'm just pulling this off without having had it prepared. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So you can look into that if you wanted more kind of advice on how to set your goals. Evaluate your plan, revise as needed, check in regularly, monitor your success. It does not have to be perfect because you're going to learn things. So be flexible, make changes as necessary, build upon your success, learn from any kind of missed opportunities, and good luck to everybody. Thank you for attending. We are a few minutes over. I'm sorry about that, but I hope answering questions worked for it. I believe that a link for the recorded session will go out as well. I believe we will definitely do that.
This is Emily. Thanks. Yeah, thanks everybody. I'll send an email around either later today or tomorrow with a link to the recording and a couple links that Sarah sends me, and you'll get all that information, the slide presentation, all that stuff. I'll send it out later today or tomorrow. And thanks everybody for joining us today. And we'll see you guys again soon.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.